Welcome, it's indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Richey, good to be with you. We got a lot on the agenda today. Breaking down news of the day, my contributor. We have Rayvana, host of Reactions on Twitch. That's a Twitch exclusive, an amazing program. Also in the bullpen, Hannah Cox, brand ambassador, Fee Online, host of Based. We're gonna talk about US sanctions on Russia and the conservative movement connected to praising Putin. Quite fascinating, all right? So we're gonna chop it up about that. Should be interesting. All right, top story of the day. A police officer murders his wife, tampers with the evidence, tries to make it look like suicide. He has now been convicted of murder. Have you heard about it? No, there's absolutely no national coverage whatsoever on this story, but that changes today. Put up his mugshot. Okay, let me give you background. This is in Putnam County, Georgia. Former police officer will now spend the rest of his life in prison for murdering his wife. Now, this guy was actually a cop when he committed the murder. But there's a background associated to this crime that's quite ironic, given the fact he was already arrested for attacking his wife. He was still employed by the police department, let go by the judge, went back to the house, killed the wife, staged the scene, corrupted the evidence, and tried to make it look like a suicide. He was still employed by the police department. According to Putnam County Sheriff Howard Seals, Michael Perot was found guilty on all counts Friday in connection with the 2020 death of 44-year-old Amanda Perot. His charges include malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Now, there are some other charges that should have been affixed to this criminal. He should have been charged with violating his oath of office. Here's why. He tampered with evidence, filed a false police report, and decided to intentionally manipulate a crime scene. He was a cop when he did all of this. The reason why he was not charged with these things is because they would then have to unravel every case he was involved in. So they decided to keep it just on the murder of his wife. Wrong move. There's more. Perot was initially arrested on January 28th, 2020, and charged with simple battery on his wife, Amanda. In addition to simple battery, he was also charged with child cruelty because his 8-year-old daughter was present at the time. He was still a cop. Now, he did end up being sentenced to life without parole by Judge Brenda Trammell, who's in that district. He was released on a $1,500 bond the next day. So this guy beats up his wife. He gets a child cruelty charge because he does it in front of his child. According to people that know the wife or that knew the wife, she's dead now. He was abusive. He was significantly abusive, okay? So he does all of this. He gets to go home, $1,500 bond. At his bond hearing, the chief magistrate wanted to put him in a condition that he have no contact with his wife, but she assured the court that her husband had no place to go and was okay to go home. Days later, Amanda, his wife, was killed by that criminal. A criminal with a badge. She vouched for him. The magistrate judge should have stuck to the guns of the sentencing, of the probation, or of the bond hearing, and said, no, it's traditional. We do a no contact bond on cases like this. Yana, he has nowhere to go. He's a police officer, first time it has happened. All of those were lies, by the way. We now know it was not the first time, but she vouched for him. She believed in him. And she's dead because of it. Michael claimed she killed herself in front of him. So the cop says, hey, it was a suicide, just coincidence. It happens when I got home from being locked up for beating up my wife. All right, so she killed herself in front of him, according to his narrative, and no one else was home at the time of her death. Seals described it as suspicious, talking about the sheriff, due to the evidence and circumstances surrounding his initial arrest. Remember, the initial arrest was for violence against his wife, all right? The sheriff also revealed that Perot did not call 911. So when they checked his phone records, this clown called his boss, Chief Kent Lawrence, at the police station after he committed murder. The chief put the cop who committed murder on unpaid leave. At the court hearing later Friday, Seals testified it was obvious from the jump that this cop killed his wife and tried to stage it based on details at the scene. A neighbor who gave Amanda refuge in their home also testified, saying she told them if anything happened, she did not kill herself. Now there's a lot to unpack here. Number one, let's go straight to the law enforcement policy angle. This is why I advocate for psychological evaluations every 6 months for every single cop in the United States of America. Somebody should have picked up on this immediately. Here's a secondary issue here. The friend, the neighbor, was aware of the abuse, went into detail about the abuse in a later conversation. If you are a friend to somebody who is being abused, I know you love the relationship you have with that person, and they may be mad at you for reporting violence against them. They may be upset, but damn it, they'll be alive. They will be alive. The judge who wanted to do the traditional thing, which is no contact bond, was talked out of it by the wife. Judges, stop it. Just because he's a cop, you had plenty of people that said the same thing in that courtroom, and you said, no, we're not going to take that risk. Please understand the data here, judges. The data says that police officers are more likely than the average citizen to do something like this. More likely, not less, more. All right. Ravana, I know you know this stuff much more than I do. Give us some of your insight here.
Yeah, well, first I want to say the man who killed his wife, the cop who killed his wife, is not the only person who killed her. It's the systemic failings of the court that allowed him to return home to her and eventually murder her when they should not have done that. They should have known better. It's not the traditional course of action. But like you said, cops are more likely to be engaged in domestic violence. I think the stat is about 40% of cops self-report that they engage in domestic violence against their partners or their spouses. But we don't see 40% of cops who are doing this being held accountable. We don't see justice for the victims that are predominantly their wives, their girlfriends, these women. We don't see justice for them. So stories like this just makes you wonder, how many women have their police officer husbands returning home to them at the end of the day to victimize them, to torture them, and abuse them, who will never see justice. And it's just we need to continue to advocate for these women, and we need to continue to advocate for accountability. And like you mentioned, there's more charges that could have been brought against this police officer. And it's another failing that they weren't, although he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison. It is a systemic failure still that they did not throw the book at him because the police, the police office itself did not want to be more introspective, did not want to have to do that extra work, to hold themselves accountable for what this abuse could also mean for the cases that they have handled. Yeah,
this cop demonstrated that he's willing to lie on police reports. He's willing to manipulate evidence. He's willing to stage a crime scene. He's willing to violate his oath of office. And he was employed by that office while doing so. They should look at his background. They now have to investigate everything he swore to, every affidavit he may have signed. Every time he gave a testimony, it said, that's the person that needs to be scrutinized. Okay, Russia, nuclear threats aimed at the US. All right, there's some elements in this story. Some I've already predicted on Indisputable. Let me give you the background. So as Russia continues to invade Ukraine, an independent sovereign nation, a functional democracy. As they continue to do this evil deed, there are evil deeds being done inside of Ukraine as well. I highlighted those yesterday, and I will touch on some of that today. It was Sunday when Putin, in a televised meeting with the country's top defense officials, had the following to say. Top officials in leading NATO countries have allowed themselves to make aggressive comments about our country. Therefore, I hereby order the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff to place the Russian Army Deterrence Force on combat alert. What does all of that mean? That means that he's ordering nuclear weapons to be war ready and war capable, okay? That's one. It gets deeper. He has placed the country on its highest state of alert. Russia's nuclear weapons are part of its deterrence strategy. Russia took control of arms from other former Soviet republics, including Ukraine and Belarus in the 1990s. Now, Russia has invaded Ukraine and Belarus, which is allied with Moscow, plans to renounce its non-nuclear status and could theoretically allow Russia to bring nuclear weapons back into the country. And breaking news today shows Belarusian troops have been spotted joining, this is according to breaking news today, joining Russian forces. However, this has been denied by their leader. President Joe Biden was asked, is this a concern? He said, no. When asked about the prospect of nuclear weapons, Joe Biden is incorrect. It is a concern, okay? It's not only a psychological concern, it's a real life concern. Biden is completely incorrect on this. The threat is not unprecedented. CNN spoke with authors of the 2017 book, Nuclear Weapons and Coercive Diplomacy. They documented 19 instances of nuclear threats and coercive language in the post-World War II era. This includes Soviet leaders like Khrushchev telling the US ambassador in 1959, the West seems to forget that a few Russian missiles could destroy all of Europe. Now, here's the fact. Russia, according to the record we have, Russia has 6,250 nuclear warheads. America has more than 5,500. That's all the information we can get from there. The Russian warheads, only 1,458 are on 527 IBMs, submarine launch missiles and bombers, all right? Okay, will these threats work in Putin's favor? Now, that's a big question. That said, the US is certainly not entering the war. They have made that very clear. Russia has waged on Ukraine, but America is not going to enter, and it is not creating a no-fly zone. Putin must realize that using nuclear weapons will bring them upon him and his people. Now, there's a lot of commentary about this out there saying, wait a minute, Putin is willing to go to the extreme on this and actually use nuclear weapons. And then you have people that are considered historians, individuals who write books about nuclear warfare or nuclear threats and diplomacy saying, oh, no. These things will never happen in this world, okay? Those are the same people that still believe that Trump cannot get reelected in the United States of America. He can, okay? All right, be careful about these cats. They've been around a long time and they have been wrong a lot, all right? Okay, let's highlight the Ukraine, Miss Grand Ukraine. All right, war has a lot of propaganda connected to it. And this is a picture of Anastasia Lena. And according to a post, she's the former 2015 Miss Grand Ukraine. She has traded her heels in for combat boots. Now, it is propaganda, okay? When you read the message, she's telling people to be strong and trying to recruit individuals to stand up for their country, all right? Now, another part of this that has been highlighted recently, and I said this yesterday, if Ukraine does not figure out how to speak directly to the apparent racism, the discriminatory actions of other Ukrainians, if they don't say something, African nations in particular will not be able to continue to support them internationally. I said that yesterday. I said it right here on Indisputable. That will happen. And I also said Russia, Vladimir Putin, of course, will use that against Ukrainians in order to dissuade public support. That's exactly what's happening today. So now you've had the Nigerian government, they have come out and denounced the actions of Ukraine. The Nigerian government has condemned the treatment of thousands of its students and citizens fleeing the war in Ukraine amid growing concerns that African students are facing discrimination by security officials and being denied entry into Poland. All right, and if you remember, all of the reporting that we highlighted right here on Indisputable that showed hyper-aggressive bias, implicit bias. I mean, they had the whole damn spectrum referring to those that are in the midst of this warfare as good white Christians. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what they said. As if those who are not Christian or white are not as valuable or sophisticated as those in this nation right now. Here's some of that.
This is unfair. Why point gun as foreigners? Why point this gun as guns? Why point gun on us? You have your family Russia fighting for us. Please, go on live on Instagram. We don't have arms. We don't have arms. We are students. We are students. We are students. What's up? We are students. We are students. You don't understand what you're not black, so you cannot talk. Dude, they can't shoot us off. Thank you.
Ван'ю, я тобі зараз скажу, хто я. Привіт, я зараз цей телефон.
Do not allow the ideology of politics to evaporate the humanity that still exists inside of you. These are human beings. These are men, women, children. These individuals are living. They are our brothers and sisters in humanity. Here's the reality. Yesterday, some of you did not like the fact that I highlighted the reality of what's happening in Ukraine. You tagged me on social media and said things like, Doc, is it really time to focus on this? Doc, you're becoming a puppet to Vladimir Putin. The silliness of that statement. You see, I make life simple. I tell the truth and don't give a damn who it offends. Now, the truth is what Russia is doing in Ukraine is immoral and wrong. The other truth is what Ukrainians are doing to black Africans, that's wrong too. You don't trade one wrong for another. And if we start doing that, if we start justifying what we are willing to look away from, what we are willing to ignore, what makes you better than the other side? Because they have justification after justification for looking the other way when Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks at a white supremacist rally. They have justification for white nationalists marching down streets and running over peaceful protesters. Truth don't care who says it. Rayvon, thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that, Doc. Because if you don't highlight this now, if we don't talk about this now, when is the time? Is it after these African, predominantly students, have become victims of Russia's aggression in Ukraine?
Right.
Do we wait till it's too late? But I also think that it's important now to highlight the disparate treatment by particularly Poland towards the Ukrainian refugees versus the refugees coming from Ukraine, but who are predominantly African students. And I think that it's emblematic of also the way that Poland and other countries in the area treat refugees coming from Syria predominantly. They've been passing legislation and arming their border to prevent these refugees from coming in versus now it's predominantly open arms towards white Ukrainians versus the disparate treatment of the Black immigrants or Black refugees coming from Ukraine as well. And it's also highlighted in the way that the media is treating Ukrainian refugees versus, we can just point to just a few months ago, the treatment of potential Afghan refugees who were presented to be a threat to democracy, who were going to come to America and commit crimes and undermine Western culture. And it's horrifying. We should be treating these refugees, these innocent victims of war, the same. Everyone should be. I don't think that the Ukrainian refugees should be treated worse. I think these refugees from non-white, non-Western countries should be treated better. And now is the time to demand that.
That's right. Very well said. All right. This is something that we've covered. A police chief who got 80 felonies, got arrested for 80 felonies. He then worked at an auto body shop while waiting to go to trial for these 80 felonies. He goes to an auto body shop to work. He steals catalytic converters. After stealing catalytic converters and getting caught for it and arrested, he then gets arrested again for faking his own death. You could not make this up. Let's put up a picture of him being escorted out of his aunt's home. He was a whole damn police chief. This is an update to a story we reported on just a few days ago. Former North Carolina police chief was arrested for allegedly faking his own death in an attempt to dodge prosecution on more than 80 felony charges. The ex-Chadbourne chief, Anthony Spivey, that's him, 36 years of age, skipped out on the court hearing, staged his own suicide, but was nabbed just after midnight on Thursday, hiding out at his aunt's apartment in South Carolina. Prosecutors tried to keep the slippery Spivey behind bars, but he remained free on bond. Then he ditched a recent court hearing claiming he was sick with COVID, okay? Facing another court date on Monday, he staged his death. What did he do? He parked his truck near a boat launch on the Lumber River, and he left a letter saying goodbye to his family, all right? So you see the crime scene, he takes his truck. I mean, this guy is a regular Barney Fife. He takes his truck, he's thinking, yeah, this'll do it. Takes his truck, parks it, writes a cryptic letter about, a suicide. Family members described the incident as a possible suicide, and Columbus County, North Carolina police found Spivey's boat at the river with a .22 caliber rifle on board. A news release said a discharged round was still in the chamber. Cops said dive crews searched for 3 days. Investigators found nothing, but they never believed he killed himself. So they basically were just diving just to say, hey, listen, we dived in the water, all right? But we know he's not dead. As investigators collected video from surveillance systems and conducted interviews, it became more apparent that the scene on the river was staged. The press release said, a warrant was issued for Spivey's arrest on Wednesday, and police caught him in the apartment complex 12:45 a.m. on Thursday. I mean, that did not take long, according to Columbus cops. He ran from the complex, but was caught in the woods nearby Horry County. Prior to this incident, he was arrested after his most recent employer accused him of stealing catalytic converters. Spivey was awaiting trial for more than 80 felony charges from 2021. 80 plus. He was accused of what? Embezzling state property evidence, trafficking opium, and trafficking by fraudulent or forging prescriptions. He was also accused of embezzling funds meant for the family of a young child battling cancer. He stole money from a sick baby. All right? Investigators said he took $8,000 intended for the family of Philip Tanner Bufkin, who died of leukemia in 2019. Spivey also allegedly stole and sold 5 guns from the police department he was chief of in between 2019 and 2021. He got away with it for a long time. Just understand this, he got away with it for a while. And obviously he was making money, but I guarantee you this, he was not making that money alone. He sold those guns to somebody. He sold that dope to somebody. He engaged with other individuals in his criminal enterprise. I'm surprised that we have not heard the follow-up story about who he was in conspiracy with. But this guy, listen, this just me keeping it Glenwood. This has to be the dumbest SOB to ever do a crime with. Anyway, he's in jail now after faking his own death. Like I said, you can't make this up. Rayvana.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This man might be the dumbest, but I think this is a story that can really be used to highlight the problems with cash bail in this country. So this man's able to be out on bail because he had the money to post it, while there are people who are awaiting trial for years at Rikers, not convicted of a crime. People who die awaiting trial, never convicted of a crime. And I'm really proud of my state, Illinois is repealing cash bail. By this time next year, it will be fully repealed. And I'm hoping that more people get involved in the movement to do this bail reform all across the country, because it creates stricter guidelines for releasing inmates. There's no cash bail, and someone like this man who is obviously a flight risk, obviously has a very high propensity to be a repeat offender if he's and continue to do crimes if he's released on bail. Might not have been able to do that. So I hope people continue to get involved in their states and try to implement the same type of judicial and bail reform all across the country.
Yep, very well said. And I got to remind people that the stats are already in. Money does not bring people back to court. If somebody shows up for court, it's not because they said, you know what, damn, I paid that bond money, I gotta go to court. It's because they don't want the other stuff connected to them not going to court, like a warrant for your arrest. All right, we got more. It's indisputable, stick and stay.
While the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of that, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against police. I told you we were coming.
Can you talk about it when it becomes a problem? Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country.
November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
Smack the back that I like. Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
All right, welcome back. We got a lot of show. Let me read some of these amazing comments from you all. Before I get to the comments, let me remind everyone, J.R. Jackson, the watch list, all right? Make sure you are tuned into the watch list every day. That's live weekdays, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Find out the stories that you should be paying attention to in news, politics, culture, current events, sports, and more. He covers so much ground. It's a remarkable show. 10-week test series at TYT. Make sure to support JR by watching live daily, and do not forget to subscribe and follow youtube.com/watchlistTYT and facebook.com/watchlistTYT. Tonight, State of the Union and Texas primary. That's being covered by the crew. President Joe Biden's State of the Union will be providing. We will be providing regular updates on the Texas primary. Join Jank, Anna, John, Francesca. Make sure you tune in. 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time. TYT.com/live. All right, here's some of the comments. Mickey C. the Silverhat Dragon. Given the circumstances, people who are under attack should be much more empathetic to others also under attack. The press is highlighting how Ukrainians are standing together, but not all are together. When any group is prevented from leaving, basically the Ukrainians are saying that African people can stay and be slaughtered so they themselves can escape, right? Okay, Tim Brennan, thank you for that, Tim. Keep telling the truth, Doc. I'm so glad you don't listen to the naysayers. Refugees need our assistance, all of them. Thank you for that. Kevin Bard says, Julia Roberts did a better job faking her drowning death. It's sleeping with the enemy. Yeah, guess he did see that movie. By the way, I want a triple dose one day. Woo! I don't know if we can handle a triple dose of Karenicity. I mean, that's some next level stuff right there. All right, Buckhorse DC, I'm cracking up, Doc. Made Money in the Building says that police chief is putting in overtime in the profession of criminality. Dang, he needs to change his name to Slimy. Bernard the Kiwi Dragon, completely with you, Doc. There is absolutely no reason to draw distinctions. Anybody caught up in a war-torn Ukraine should evacuate all the same, whether it be black or white. Yeah, if they choose to, that's correct. All right, Naughtiest Maximus. All right, I like that. Cops and domestic violence, sadly, often go together, hand in hand. that and police officer is one of the top 10 jobs sought out by sociopaths and psychopaths. That's correct. That's a fact. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would.
You want to call the police on them for having a barbecue on a Sunday.
I feel free. Back off.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life. My matters. Black Lives Matter.
Have fun paying for all this.
Black Lives Matter. My
time. Have a great time, ma'am.
Black Lives Matter. My matters.
You make no sense. What is wrong with you?
People don't matter, but her matters. Black lives don't matter. Her
This is a bit of a throwback, Karen. I wanted to remind everyone that simple slogans, it is a campaign. Black Lives Matter is a campaign. Yes, it's a movement. Yes, it's all of those other things, but it's also a campaign, right? Black Lives Matter. You got t-shirts at Walmart. The slogan, Black Lives Matter, caused this kind of response from someone who obviously does not believe black lives should matter enough to have print on a t-shirt. You know, you can just not buy the shirt. You can walk past it. I'm sure there are other items of clothing you would not purchase. Maybe you don't like the color, maybe you don't like what it says, maybe you don't like the brand name, I don't know. But this kind of reaction has now become very normative in extreme conservative circles in particular. Why does this message of black lives disrupt their psychology so much? Why does it? Well, here's why. As my dear sister who has been on the show would say, when you are in a privileged position, equality looks like oppression to you. That's why. All right, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think one, it's ridiculous. What she's saying is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the meows in the video to censor what she was saying were fantastic, and yes. I love that. But I think it is just like it helps display how ignorant and childlike these individuals' minds are. That their initial reaction to seeing something that upsets them is to have a temper tantrum in public, to publicly freak out. Or her, reaction is to grab the nearest thing and start smashing it on the ground. And I feel bad. I feel really bad watching that for the people who work at that Walmart who now have to clean up this woman's mess because she doesn't have an adult brain or she can't function, like a respectable adult in public. She has to do this freak out because she saw something she doesn't like. Now some minimum wage employee has to clean up her mess. I mean, if I worked there, I would walk out and hand her the broom. Right? Yeah. I'm not cleaning this up for you. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, what she did was criminal. Obviously, there should have been an arrest, but I highly doubt she was arrested. Okay. Why are Republicans so fascinated with Vladimir Putin? I mean, they love the guy. And guess what? I have uncovered evidence, clear evidence that shows exactly why they support Vladimir Putin. Here it is.
Today, in 2024, a crazy thing happened, and Biden were running against Putin for president of the United States.
Putin.
Who would you vote for?
I would vote for Putin.
Wow.
That's a Trump supporter. That's a Trump supporter. Here's more.
What we're seeing is 100% fabricated, okay? Now, obviously, if Pelosi and all these people are for Ukraine, you go opposite. That's just
common sense.
Common sense. Okay.
I know, my grandmother told me I shouldn't laugh at people. Did you see how they were all in unison? Of course, if Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, if they say water is wet, obviously it is not. This is the genesis of this whole thing. Trump made politics more tribal than ever in the United States of America. It was already tribal by the nature of political discourse. But what he did is he created what's called binary marketing techniques inside of politics. Binary marketing is simple. You present yourself in a way where people will either love you or hate you. They either agree with everything you say or nothing you say. If there is any deviation from this side, then they must be put on the other side. And now individuals are unable to independently think. It's called indoctrination. They cannot independently think and conclude based on logic. Okay, there's another one. Here it is.
Stand up. Сейчас работа. It's Tejas on the front line with the denazifiers and liberators of Ukraine. These guys are tough, these guys are ready, and there's plenty of them. So far, Russia has used about 10% of its military power, and we're getting ready to bring the hammer down. These guys are gonna save and liberate all the good people in Ukraine, and the bad people, boom, kick their ass.
Yeah, another Trump supporter. His name is Russell Bentley. He's standing with Russian troops. How in the hell did he get over there? I'm not talking about in Russia. How is he with the Russian military? Who gave him the security pass? I got to tell you this, Russell Bentley. The comrades are not going to let you come back to America. I'm telling you, you know too much. All right, this is fascinating, Ravana, very fascinating stuff, right? Republicans are literally supporting Vladimir Putin. Marjorie Taylor Greene just a few days ago spoke at a pro-Putin rally. They were shouting Putin, Putin all over the audience. She came, she spoke. What's happening? What's going on in the world?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say I'm right there with you. I was reading the story about the man from Texas who's in Ukraine with Russian troops, and my first thought was, how the hell did you get there? Right. How did you end up there from Austin?
And then he's live streaming. They allowed him to live stream.
Okay, but yeah. So when it comes to the other, the pro-Putin sentiment from the Republicans, I mean, we saw the woman who was literally just like, Biden and Pelosi are pro-Ukraine, so obviously Putin's good. It's just like the simplification, the team sportsification of politics, right? Like, yeah, my team good, your team bad, your team like this, so my team, has to go the opposite way. And it's a pathetic, unnuanced way to view politics and leads you down some like really, dangerous and dark roads. But also just like the thought that, when my mom used to always say to me, if so-and-so told you to jump off a bridge, would you do it? For these people, it's like if Nancy Pelosi told you not to jump off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? It's ridiculous.
Jumping off a bridge may be good now if Nancy Pelosi said do not do it. All right, we got more on the other side. It's indisputable, stick and stay.
I'm wearing one of our pieces of merchandise. So the funny thing about the Dragon Squad, that's what our viewers call themselves. That's the name of the group, but every individual chooses their own name. You might have Cincinnati Dragon, you might have Harry Potter dragon. We have a Grandma Sunshine dragon is one of those that I remember. These are people that like to have an element of themselves, their lives, what's significant to them reflected as a part of the community. But the concept of the Dragon Squad is just something I threw away as a joke. I was mocking the Proud Boys, these like right-wing groups that come up with a name for themselves that they think is cool, but it's actually really lame. And I thought, off the top of my head, I can come up with something that's still kind of lame, but much cooler. And so I threw out Dragon Squad, and I just moved on with my life. But everybody liked it, and so they kept it going, and so we've embraced it. And I think again, this was during the period of the pandemic. I think it was sort of nice to have a renewed sense of community, a feeling that you're a part of something when everything seems so chaotic. And as a result of that, we've got independent artists online streaming, making beautiful digital art of dragons. We've got, we've released a number of pieces of merchandise that people love sending us photos of them. And then, by the way, for me personally, people send me, like you can probably see in the background, like a knitted dragon someone sent me. There's a dragon book they sent me, dragon board games they send me. People have done like custom ironworks, making dragon bottle openers. Like the fans are super invested in diamond art and things like that. And so it's great that they send this stuff. Sometime we're gonna have to set up a wall of all of it. But yeah, it's definitely brought the community a lot closer together. The fact that we were no longer in this big studio, I felt a lot more personally attached to people. It felt very immediate. And I know that I personally needed the connection.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome back. We got a lot of show left. Let me read a couple of comments. Lynn says, is BLM Karen advocating for a new Olympic event? Merchandise toss. Yeah. Nadia's Maximus, I wish a Karen would. Just makes me laugh every time Dr. Richard says it. Delicious, like a holiday roast beef with crescent rolls. That's good, isn't it? That's good. I know. Moon Dragon. Trump derangement syndrome is not what they think it is. As usual, they have it wrong. Okay. This is an ironic story. So there's a police officer, a former lieutenant, who now has a sexual allegation suit against him. Let's put up a picture of the cop. All right, this is out of Dunwoody, Georgia. A second former Dunwoody police officer has filed a suit against that person. His name is Lieutenant Fidel Espinazo. Multiple officers have accused Lieutenant Espinazo of sexual harassment. In his complaint, Castellanos, who alleges that as early as 2017, Espinazo sent him sexually explicit text messages and requested nude photos. He also alleges that the lieutenant requested sexual favors from him and took a photo of Castellanos while he was using the bathroom. Leila Castellanos, who is also included in the suit, claims that Espinazo texted her and asked inappropriate questions regarding her relationship with her husband. This is the second lawsuit against the former lieutenant. The first one came from Officer Roger Hellstad in 2020. According to court documents, that suit was dismissed in federal court. It is now being appealed. The suit was dismissed because the plaintiff's lawyer failed to file an appellant's brief by a certain date. So this is a significant technicality for why it was dismissed. They do get to do it again. The lawsuit also named City of Dunwoody, the Dunwoody Police Foundation, the Dunwoody Police Department, and the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners as defendants. And this story is developing, okay? The irony of this story is this: there were credible allegations that date back a couple of years ago. Well, he was allowed to remain on the force, okay? In addition to that, the text messages were exposed. And the chief in a report later admitted the text messages are sexual in nature. And they are inappropriate as well. But then said, but he didn't coerce anybody. There's an inequity of power here, right? You have a lieutenant who is sexually harassing other officers. And listen, people will say Doc is anti-police. I'm literally in these stories, I'm standing up for police who are being harassed by their supervisors because their supervisors and the unions don't give a damn about them. Those are the ones who are anti-police. All right, Rayvana, thoughts on this case?
Yeah, I think it's really gross that that it was just like the chief of police sort of hand waved the text away, saying they weren't coercive. You can't say that it's not coercive when it is a superior officer, eliciting sexual favors or sexually harassing someone beneath them. It's a power structure where the lieutenant here in this case is always going to have power over the officers who hold a lower rank, which is in and of itself coercive. So, I think that that's just a disgusting failure in a way that they chose to protect themselves instead of the inferior officers in this case.
Well said. All right, there's a school teacher slaps a student, caught on video. Put up the still of the student slapping, of the teacher slapping the student. Okay? The teacher has been allowed to retire with all benefits, not arrested, no penalty, no prosecution. Let me give you background. This is in Indiana. Gemtown High School teacher was granted early retirement with pension after he was captured on a video striking a student with enough force to cause actual injury. That teacher, his name is Mike Hosinski, who will not be allowed on school grounds nor affiliated with the high school. That'll do it. He beats up a child and say, hey guy, you will never be allowed to teach here again. Now get out of here with full benefits and no criminal prosecution. The person was granted early retirement, which many consider that to be a bonus, right? You give that for good behavior, not bad. He got early retirement after he was captured on a video striking a student. This isn't the first time his conduct was brought into question. Let's put up his picture again. I want people to get real familiar with what he looks like, all right? This is not the first time his conduct was brought into question. In 2019, he had promoted his pro-Trump and pro-conservative views in the classroom with messages like, proud to be a conservative. Now remember, they're telling us critical race theory is the problem, right? Okay, he got messages like proud to be a conservative, choose life, your mom did, and liberalism is a mental disorder. Hillary and Obama are criminals. President Donald Trump is great, and Democrats are liars. All of this was inside of his classroom, all right? According to the South Bend Tribune, the incident, which occurred Friday morning, has been referred to the Indiana Department of Child Services, the county sheriff's office, and the school officials. They said, yeah, they confirmed it on Friday, all right? The attorneys released video of the encounter because of the request of the Tribune, all right? Let me show you some more of the stills, and I will narrate what happened. The student is walking away. He runs after the student. He catches up with the student. He grabs the student, throws the student on the wall, and then physically strikes the student. After striking the student, he grabs the student again, picks the student falls. He then picks the student up, says some other words that we cannot hear. And that's when you see other students coming out, watching him do this. And that's when he leaves. He has not been arrested. He should be. He was allowed early retirement, full benefits, no arrest. Thoughts on this? I know you see a bunch of crimes here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrifying. And I used to work in a school for kids who had behavioral and emotional disabilities, and those students would beat on me all day long. I'd get slapped, I'd get kicked, punched, spit on. And one thing that they teach you as you're going into those scenarios, and going into those jobs, is that you need to be able to keep your calm in these situations, because these are children you're dealing with, and a lot of them have gone through some stuff in their background. So as these kids were beating on me all day long, it is frustrating, but you can never return that type of anger. You can never return that type of physicality. And the fact that this, this teacher was willing to, engage with a student. I mean, God, like half of his size, with such force and aggression over a dispute about the student wearing a hoodie in the classroom is appalling. And the fact that parents and other students are rallying behind the teacher is horrifying to me, because those students should know that they deserve better, and they should never be treated like this by, not just a teacher, but any adult in their life.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
That's right. And let's be very clear. Many of those parents are Trump supporters. There's a political connection with this criminal who should be arrested. So they are supporting him over supporting the children. It tells you what kind of movement surrounds that community. Let's put up a picture quickly of the superintendent, Byron Sanders. Byron Sanders will be involved in this story. The buck stops with him. There he is. All right. I wonder, does he have a pro-Trump sign in his room too? Okay. All right. There are 3 Republicans in the United States who voted to keep lynching a thing. Let me give you background to this. There are 3 Republicans who voted against an anti-lynching bill. I'm going to explain to you who they are. The House voted on a bill that would make murder by lynching a federal hate crime. Sounds like a good idea to me, right? It has been a bill proposed for more than a century, and it has failed every time. Every time. And I guarantee you the majority of the people voting against it were not Democrats in the modern era. In the modern era, okay? So lawmakers estimated they had tried more than 200 times to pass a measure that directly said this type of attack, meaning lynching, is a hate crime. We know that this has been a tactic to terrorize black communities. This bill was approved 422 to 3. 422 to 3. And expected to pass the Senate, where it enjoys broad support. 422 to 3. 3 Republicans voted against it. Who are they? The bill was a bipartisan effort led by Senator Tim Scott and Democratic Senator Cory Booker. The 3 Republicans who voted against making lynching a hate crime were Representative Andrew Clyde, Tom Massey, and Chip Roy. Let's put up their pictures. Okay, that's good old Clyde. It's good old Massey. And that's Roy. Now, some of you may say, well, maybe they had a reason. Maybe there's some philosophical reason why they would prefer to not add more laws. Yeah, that's it. They don't want more laws. We got enough laws, right? Okay. Representative Bobby Rush highlighted the hypocrisy of this about the men who refused to support the bill and mentioned some of the more egregious things that the men have supported. Let's put up the graphic from Representative Bobby Rush. The 3 men who voted against the Anti-Lynching Act, Clyde called the insurrectionist normal tourist visit. Massey wrote a bill to allow guns in schools. And Chip Roy called lynching an example of justice. There you have it. And you still think that these individuals are not involved in creating policies that are antithetical to the progress of Black communities, brown communities, and historically marginalized communities? Rayvana, what are your thoughts on these clowns?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about some of the excuses that these Congress people might use to explain why they voted no. Like, and number one being they don't want more laws, they don't want bigger government. Another, common talking point is there was an issue with the language of the bill. We thought it could be interpreted too broadly by the courts and whatnot. But don't any of you watching for 1 second buy into that. It is just an excuse for their racism. They don't want this to be considered a hate crime because they see no problem with anti-Black hate crimes. Don't let them lie to you. These are racists. These are racists who get to decide on our laws. And let's be thankful this time that, they weren't able to stop this bill from passing. But don't for 1 second think that it's because they have some sort of, ideological opposition to big government. It's because they are racist.
That's right. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Tell people how they can check you out, follow your work.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see my show Reactions every Thursday. It's a Twitch exclusive, twitch.tv/TYT at 4 p.m. Eastern. And you can check out my videos for Rebel HQ on YouTube and Facebook. Doc, thank you so much for having me back on.
Always a pleasure. All right, we got more on the other side. The bullpen is next. Stick and stay. The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion. that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
It's like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong. We start a revolution. Yes, another one. Aren't you excited? Wow. And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, everybody. Yay!
You know, this is where it started in a lot of ways.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right.
They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care. You don't see a lot of news coverage in the mainstream media of the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests that happened throughout the country.
Black Americans are hurting. Minorities in this country are hurting.
We always talk about starting from the bottom up, but the problem is the bottom up is always the least amount of power. No one cares about them, and until someone actually cares about them, then we'll do something about it.
Please, for God's sake, America, understand, acknowledge, and work towards getting to a new reality where Black lives actually matter.
All right, welcome back. We still got a lot of show. Let me read a couple of comments. I only have time for just a few, and then we're gonna get into the next segment. Always good to hear from everybody, even if I can't read your comment, okay? Thank you. Just Be Anti-Racist says, saw this story on this teacher this morning on the local news, and it was reported some students marching on the teacher's behalf. The moment I saw the video, I knew Dr. Richard would cover the story. And you knew right. You knew 100% correctly. Shauna Hayes, where are this kid's parents? Sue, school and teacher, that's correct. Twitch. Leon Death 07 says, Madison Cawthorn voted for it? Yeah, you know, when you're to the right of that guy, I mean, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the bullpen. She's back in the bullpen today. We have Ms. Hannah Cox, content manager at the Foundation for Economic Education, very accomplished individual. Ms. Cox, good to have you back on the show. How are you?
So good to be back. Good to see you again.
All right, we're gonna chop it up about this fascination that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you see it as well. Conservatives supporting Putin, praising the actions of Russia, and those who are silent also, when typically this would be a unifying issue for Americans when there's a functional democracy attacked, but it is not. I don't want to presume what you know or believe about that sentiment that's happening, so let us know and I will respond to you.
Yeah, as far as that sentiment goes, I've been really troubled to see that and honestly a bit surprised. I consider myself a libertarian. I'm a non-interventionist. I don't want to see America getting involved any further in this conflict. And I do want to be clear that I think America already has its hands dirty somewhat when it comes to the Ukraine and Russia. So I want to make sure that we don't continue to assert ourselves in regions that have nothing to do with us, continue to destabilize regions, continue to empower groups that can one day come back to harm us and incur blowback from that, right? So I really want to see us stay out of this. I will praise Biden thus far for not putting boots on the ground, but I've been really surprised to see some, and I would put them on the far right. I wouldn't say these are mainstream conservatives, but some on the alt-right and far right have been actually praising Putin, seeming to really take Russia's side in this. I think that's very creepy and bizarre. You can be anti-war and you can be anti-interventionist without praising or simping for a psychopath, right? And so that's been very, very concerning to me. And I think there's all the difference in the world in saying that perhaps America has its hands dirty and that we're getting some blowback from some of this and excusing the actions of what Putin's doing right now, because there is only one country and one person who is actively attacking another country and pursuing a war and killing innocent people. And that's unilaterally wrong and should be condemned.
Ms. Cox, hell has just frozen over because I agree with everything you just said. So let me highlight some nuances here, because Democrats and Republicans, they, in their leadership capacities, they have messed up other countries. I'm anti-war personally, okay? Our policy in America was to make sure Ukraine never could get a nuclear weapon or to denuclearize, right? And to abandon a lot of their weapons technology. That was a strategy by Republican and Democratic presidents that was in American policy. Ukraine said, hey, listen, we need this stuff just in case we get invaded. Well, no. You know, you're never going to get invaded. You know, we're going to end up making you part of NATO. Lies, all right, lies, right? So we get in, you know, they do some of it, then they get caught trying to not do what they said they would do in the agreement, and then they come back to the table. Looks like they did more as far as adhering to the agreement that the West or Western nations wanted them to do. They're now being invaded. It is clear, it's very clear that this is immoral, what Russia is doing. Now, the only pushback I have to your original proclamation is this. You may see this as people on the far right or alt-right, but let me bring your attention to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I know we on the left, right? I'm a progressive guy. So I contextualize Marjorie Taylor Greene as an extremist. However, in the context of conservative politics, she is not. She's one of the top fundraisers for the Republican Party. She's one who is significantly praised by Donald J. Trump in his rallies across the country. And she gets probably just as many speaking engagements in front of conservative audiences as let's say Donald Trump or another mainstream Republican. So I don't see how she is to the extreme right of the conservative movement. And just on Friday, where was she at? She was at a pro-Putin white nationalist conference. And she has created a significant atmosphere around her that's basically pro-Putin. And if they're not all the way pro-Putin, they're definitely not anti-Putin. So help explain that. How does she fit into the agenda of conservative politics in America?
Well, my opinion on Marjorie Taylor Greene is that she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I think she's off her rocker. And I think that that's a view held by most mainstream people. Now, look, we can have a conversation about where conservatism is and where it's moved. And I think that's valid, right? That's one reason I no longer say I'm a conservative. I'm a libertarian. And really what the conservatism movement was of the 80s and 90s is not where it's at now. I do think there's a battle going on for who the GOP is going to be post-Trump. And I think that's a significant battle. Even if you're not in the party, that's something that should concern people. Because what we want to see is a party that returns to the foundations of things like limited government, free markets, individual liberty, and these are things that we can debate, but these are solid principles, right? These are respectable ideas. And then you have this nationalist, often racist, very cringe side to the right that is battling to take over the GOP. And I think it remains to be seen who's going to win out now with Donald Trump somewhat out of the picture. And to be honest, I don't know. But I would still put people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Madison Cawthorn, I would put them on the far right. I would not say that they hold the same views as like William F. Buckley or people who were traditional stalwarts of conservatism.
Okay, well, they're becoming dinosaurs. So let's talk about Trump. Trump is a small man. He's small mentally, he's petty, he's a small guy. And what he did is he downsized what the Republican platform was. He had to shrink it to fit him. And he also did the same thing for the institution of the presidency. He had to shrink the institution to fit him because he's a small man. But what happened in the process of that, he also downsized in a significant way the nuance of politics in the Republican Party. There was a time you all said, or conservatives said, we're the big tent party, right? We want to celebrate diversity. We want to make sure that we are inclusive in our openness to understanding different variations of policy application. And let me tell you why I actually would like you guys to return, and I'm talking about conservatives. I would like you guys to return to a sense of normative political behavior. Here's why. As long as you all allow, I'm talking about conservatives, people like Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and others, as long as you allow the tail to wag the dog, Democrats will take advantage of that. Because Democrats will promise the world, they get elected. 4 years, they deliver nothing. Re-election comes, right? And all they gotta say is, well, hell, are you gonna vote for them or vote for me? There's no competition. So now they're able to take the votes for granted in a way because you don't have a viable option in the marketplace of politics. You all need to come back and get your minds together, come back to the table with some actual solutions and stop with this personality over politics stuff. Do you not agree?
I agree 100%. And I actually said this on a Fox News radio tour. So I went into the weeds and I said this. I said, if the GOP continues to reelect Trump or to put anybody of his ilk up as the party bearer, they will continue to lose. And I really only see one way that the party loses in the next presidential election, because Biden's presidency is not going great. He doesn't have a whole lot to hang his hat on. But if they put up Trump or somebody in his camp, that's all you have to do. All you have to do is say, we're not that guy, we're not them. And people are like, yeah, thank God. Right?
Yeah, I actually agree. I've said that on record. I said the best thing that can happen to Democrats is if Trump runs for president, because Trump excites the opposite base in a way that Biden cannot. So I'm with you on that. I actually hope Trump does run. So 74% of Americans, they are calling the Russian invasion unjustified, 74%. Now, that's a big deal. That was YouGov poll. That's a big deal because 74% of Americans don't agree on anything anymore, right? So 74% of Americans are saying, hey, this is a bad thing. But when it started, 88%. You got to think about this. When this assault first started, Hannah, 88% of Americans said Russia is wrong. Now, the latest poll, that number has dropped to 74%. And I guarantee you, give it a week or two, that number will be less than 70%. We've seen this happen before. It's social conditioning, it's social engineering, and it comes from the top. This is dangerous. This is dangerous stuff. So what's the plan inside of the conservative movement to try to get a grasp back on a more normative political dynamic in America?
I don't want to tell you that there's a plan because I'm not sure there is one, to be totally honest. This is one reason I stay outside the party and I work mostly on policy, because as a whole, I really don't know that there is a concerted effort to really get things together. When it comes to, more specifically the anti-war effort, I think that I feel a bit more comfortable in, and I think you do still have a broad coalition of people who are progressives and libertarians and some principled conservatives who are in that coalition. And I think that we should be concerned with some of the narratives that are floating around about this conflict right now. I think there are a lot of war drums being built, a lot of fear mongering happening. And listen, I understand the feelings that people have when they see people being persecuted, they see people being killed, they see people rallying to defend their country. I understand the instinct, the humanity that would make you want to rush in and get involved. But I think we have to do a really good job of continuing to message to these people outside of the anti-war movement and remind them of how catastrophic our interventions have been over the past 2 decades, how much we have hurt the world through those interventions, how we have failed to ever actually keep people safe or prevent the loss of innocent life. And I certainly think that would be the case here if we were to escalate the situation and get involved with Russia, which is a nuclear power. And so for me, that's the dominant thing we have to talk about right now, because we know there are lots of special interests in people who are gunning to enter this conflict.
Yeah, and I think this is going to get worse before it gets better. So let me highlight something that a lot of Republicans are saying, those that are pro-Trump, and they're trying to be silent about Putin. Obviously, Trump has called Vladimir Putin a genius, said he's smart. He tried to clean it up by saying, he's smart because everybody else is dumb. All right, so we know that two-step by Trump. Here's the thing. When you then pose the question to these very hardcore Trump supporters, well, what would Trump do differently? They will say, I don't know. Or they will say, well, he'll do sanctions. Well, that's what Biden is doing. And let me remind everyone, because I find it really, really ironic that we forget that it was actually Donald Trump who decided to lift sanctions from Russia. So much so that in a bipartisan move, the House literally voted against him in a massive way, overwhelming majority, voted against lifting these Russia sanctions during the presidency of Donald Trump. Why do you think that message does not connect with those who support Trump when they say things like, well, Trump would have been tougher on Vladimir Putin when he actually had to be disciplined by the House when he went to lift sanctions on Russia?
I think this is actually a pretty easy question to answer, and that's because most of his base was never ideological. They were never paying attention to actual policy. This is the same reason you'd see people like the NRA, which is supposed to stand for the Second Amendment, coming out and fundraising and cheerleading for Donald Trump, who actually passed more gun control than Obama. It never tracked. He was never doing the things that they thought he was doing, they said he was doing, but they weren't paying attention to policies, they were paying attention to personality. And I think a lot of people got hoodwinked by him. I really do. And I think that that's a sad thing that happened in our society. And I think it's something that, much of his base is still being hoodwinked by him. I'm not on his mailing list, but I feel pretty confident that some of this pro-Putin agenda that we're hearing from the far right is coming from that camp. And I also think there's been a lot of the narrative from him as well, that Biden has ties to Ukraine and with the Hunter Biden scandal. And I think that's some of the animosity you see towards Ukraine. And none of it is actually based on the actual conflict, right? Which is quite nuanced and has decades leading up to it. And we should be having that conversation, but we're really not. Instead, we're actually just seeing like this Democrat-Republican narrative continue to play out. And I think that it's mostly bogus.
I have a theory, and I want you to tell me, am I off basis here? Here's my theory. I think there's a section of American society, primarily those caught up in the Trump era of politics, who are at heart anti-democracy. At heart. They may not articulate it that way, but they do not appreciate nor honor democracy.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I want to add to that. I think there's also a significant portion on the left that I would say that about, that I think we see on both sides. There's factions that do not truly care about free speech. They don't truly care about following the will of the people. They don't actually want to live in a tolerant society that allows people to protest. And I've seen this on both sides, right? Because as a libertarian, I'm often kind of caught in the middle. But when the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, I was mostly supportive of that. I believe there's tons of police brutality, and I've worked in criminal justice. There's tons of systemic racism. I wanted to elevate that and celebrate it. The right hated those protests. Now we see protests from the right against things like masking and lockdowns that I think have had really terrible implications as far as children's learning abilities and pushing kids into homes that are domestically abusive.
Let me tell you the big difference between those protests and the Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, they were basically protesting outside, they were marching, they were following the tradition of civil rights heroes like Dr. King and others, right? So they were getting to the street, they were making a lot of noise so that you can see, you can pay attention to what they were complaining about and what they needed the society to fix, right? But for the mask protocols and the protests, what you see happening is a violation of actual law. Private companies are able to enforce mask laws inside of their facilities. That is common and settled. But you have individuals who are literally going into these facilities, breaking laws, committing criminal trespass. You have individuals at school boards who are saying, well, you cannot enforce a mask mandate inside of the school system, so we're going to violate it by, as parents coming up to the school, which is obviously illegal, and making their protest on the school campus as adults. Those things are illegal. Those things also compromise the safety of our students. You see the difference in some of that?
No, I don't, because I also want to point out that there were portions of the Black Lives Matter rallies that were looting and burning businesses, which is illegal. And I will say, I disagree with people protesting at private businesses, but at schools and school boards, that's exactly where people should be protesting. Take your argument to the government. Those are public institutions.
Right, the issue is not the protest, like the protest on school property is a problem. So you and I agree with that, right?
No, I think school property is public property.
No, I mean, during the school day, a parent coming up to the school and protesting on school property, that's not a problem?
Not at all, as long as they're not violent. No, I'm a huge believer in civil disobedience.
That is a problem. That's actually against law. I'm a former high school teacher, man. You can't have parents who do not have lawful access to come into a school system protesting if they do not have clearance to do so. Just because it's public property, you can't go and protest inside of a police precinct. They can't use common sense controls for the safety of their staff. They can do that, and we can do it for the safety of children. All right, I got to wrap. I got the next show coming up, but I appreciate you being on. You are always welcome to come back, okay?
Thank you.
All right, don't forget Deep Dive. Jordan Yule is next. Remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of the planet. Remember, the truth is always indisputable.